My wife laughed when they mocked me. Not nervously, not to ease tension, but like she agreed with them. That laugh stayed with me. Long after the room went quiet. Long after the wine glasses were empty. The dinner was supposed to be simple. A small celebration with her colleagues. Nothing formal, nothing serious. Claire had told me it mattered. The way she always did when her world was involved. And mine was optional. It's just one night, she said, adjusting her dress in the mirror. Try not to be awkward. I nodded, already knowing what she meant. The restaurant was expensive in a quiet way. Low lights, soft music. The kind of place where people spoke softly but judged loudly. The moment we walked in, Claire changed. Her posture straightened. Her smile sharpened. She let go of my hand before we reached the table. Introductions began immediately. Names, titles, firms, promotions. This is Claire, someone said proudly. She laughed, hugged, leaned in. I stood beside her, waiting. She didn't introduce me. Not once. Someone finally noticed me and asked, "And you are?" Claire laughed lightly. "Oh, this is Michael. Just Michael. No husband. No partner. No anything." The conversation moved on without hesitation. They talked about growth, ambition, pressure. Words stacked like trophies. I listened quietly. Then one man smiled at Claire and said, "You must get bored being the most driven one at home." The table laughed. Claire laughed too. "Well," she said, glancing at me, "someone has to bring the ambition." More laughter. I felt my face burn, but I stayed silent. Later, another voice chimed in. "At least you don't have to compete with him." That's when it happened. Claire laughed again, longer this time, and said, "Exactly." That single word crushed something in me. Exactly. On the drive home, I finally spoke. "You didn't defend me," I said quietly. She sighed, annoyed. They were joking. "Don't be so sensitive." I looked out the window, realizing something I hadn't want. The humiliation didn't end that night. It followed me quietly, settling into the spaces she used to fill. The next morning, Claire acted normal. Too normal. She hummed while making coffee, checked her phone, smiled at messages she didn't share. "You okay?" she asked casually, as if nothing had happened. I nodded, because arguing would have required her to care. A week later, she invited me to another event. This time smaller, more personal. "Just drinks with the team," she said. "Come if you want. Come if you want. Not come with me." At the bar, I watched it happen again. Only clearer this time. She stood close to Daniel. Too close. Their shoulders touching as they talked. I stood a few steps away, holding my glass like a prop. Someone asked, "Claire, is Michael joining us tonight?" She smiled politely. "He's around." Around. Like background noise. Daniel laughed and said, "You two are so different." Claire smiled. That's one way to put it. Another laugh. Another cut. When someone joked about ambition again, Claire didn't even hesitate. "She's the driven one," Daniel said. "Some men are just comfortable." Claire laughed and added, "Comfortable is generous." The group laughed. I didn't. That was the moment I realized. She wasn't just allowing it anymore. She was shaping it. Later, Daniel leaned closer to her and said, "You deserve someone who keeps up." She didn't pull away. She smiled. On the ride home, I didn't confront her. I already knew the answer. At home, she took off her heels and said, "You were quiet again." I looked at her. Really looked. "You talk about me like I'm not there," I said. She rolled her eyes. "You're imagining things." "No," I said calmly. "I'm finally seeing them." She scoffed. "You're being dramatic." That word hurt more than the laughter. Dramatic. I went to bed early. Not tired. Just done. Lying there, staring at the ceiling. I understood something painful but clear. The change didn't announce itself. It settled in quietly, like something rearranged while I wasn't looking. Claire stopped asking my opinion. Not just about work or plans, but about anything that mattered to her. If I spoke, she listened politely. The way you listen to someone you've already decided not to follow. Her phone became more important than our conversations, and I learned the sound of her smile without seeing it. One evening, while we ate dinner in silence, her phone buzzed and she glanced at it, smiling before she could stop herself. "Who's that?" I asked calmly. She hesitated, then said, "Daniel." Like the name didn't carry weight. She didn't explain why he was texting at night, and I didn't ask. A few days later, I joined her at another work gathering, not because she invited me, but because it would have looked strange if I wasn't there. At the table, someone joked, "Claire works late, but Michael doesn't seem to mind." She laughed lightly. "He's very low maintenance." Low maintenance. The phrase wrapped itself around me. Tight and quiet. Another person added, "That must make things easier." Claire nodded. "It really does." I realized then. She wasn't describing me. She was justifying herself. On the way home, I said, "You talk about me like I'm convenient." She sighed, annoyed. "Why are you turning everything into a problem?" "Because it is one." She rolled her eyes and said, "You're reading too much into harmless comments." But they weren't harmless. They were rehearsed. That night, lying beside her, I understood something painful and clear. She didn't need to leave me to replace me. She just needed to stop seeing me as someone worth protecting. And once your spouse stops protecting you, every room becomes hostile, even the one you sleep in. By then, the disrespect no longer needed an audience. It lived comfortably between us. Claire stopped pretending I was her equal and started treating me like something settled for. She corrected me in small ways, the kind that sound harmless, but are meant to remind you of your place. If I told a story, she interrupted to clarify it, usually making it sound smaller. If I expressed an opinion, she smiled and said, "That's cute," as if I were trying something above my level. One night, while we were eating dinner, she mentioned Daniel again, not casually this time, but deliberately. "He gets it," she said. "Some people just think bigger." I looked at her, waiting for her to soften it. She didn't. She continued eating, as if she hadn't just compared me to someone else. I asked calmly, "Do you hear how you talk to me?" She put her fork down, irritated. "Why are you always so sensitive lately?" Sensitive. The word had become her shield. Later that week, she asked me not to come to an event, said it would be easier if she went alone. Easier for who? I asked. She hesitated, then said, "For everyone." That answer said more than she realized. That night, she came home late, energized, talkative, everything she hadn't been with me. She talked about conversations, inside jokes, ideas she never shared with me. I listened, quietly understanding something I didn't want to admit. She wasn't crossing boundaries by accident. She was stepping over them because she no longer respected them. And once respect is gone, fidelity becomes a technicality, not a promise. I lay awake beside her, aware of the space between us, realizing the truth. She didn't need to cheat to betray me. She already had. I realized other people could see it before I admitted it to myself. Because strangers notice patterns you try to explain away. It happened at a small gathering. Nothing official. Just drinks after work that Claire said I could stop by if I wanted. Stop by, not join. When I arrived, conversations paused for half a second, just long enough for me to feel it. Claire was standing beside Daniel, laughing, comfortable, leaning in. She looked surprised when she saw me. Not happy, not relieved, surprised. "Oh," she said, "you came. Not you're here. Not I'm glad. Just came." Daniel smiled politely, the kind of smile you give someone who doesn't belong. Someone nearby asked, "So Michael, what do you think about all this growth talk?" Before I answered, Claire did. "He's not really into this world," she said lightly. "He prefers simple things." Simple. The word landed hard. Daniel chuckled and said, "That's refreshing, honestly." Claire laughed. "That's one way to say it." The group laughed with her. I felt it then. Not embarrassment, but clarity. She wasn't being careless. She was positioning herself. Later, when I stood beside her, she didn't turn toward me. She angled away. I asked quietly, "Why do you talk about me like I'm not here?" She sighed, tired. "Why do you always make things uncomfortable?" Uncomfortable, as if my presence was the problem. On the way home, she stared out the window and said, "You should try harder to fit in." That sentence stayed with me. Fit in, as if marriage was an audition. That night, lying awake, I accepted something painful. She wasn't choosing between me and another man. She was choosing between identities. And I no longer matched the version of herself she wanted to be seen as. Once that happens, Love becomes conditional, and respect becomes optional. It stopped being subtle after that. Because once someone believes they're justified, they stop hiding. Claire no longer pretended Daniel was just a colleague. She referenced him openly, comfortably, like his presence needed no explanation. "He thinks I should apply," she said one night, scrolling through her phone while I sat beside her. "He says I'm wasting my potential." I asked quietly, "What do you think?" She didn't look up. "I think he's right." That answer hurt more than any argument. Later, she added casually, "He listens differently. He asks the right questions." I nodded, feeling replaced in pieces. A few days later, she came home late again, energized, animated, talking fast. "Daniel said something interesting," she began, and talked for 10 straight minutes without once noticing I hadn't responded. I realized then, she wasn't sharing with me. She was rehearsing conversations she'd already had with him. At another gathering, someone joked, "You two sound like a team." Claire smiled instantly. "We work really well together." I stood right there. No correction, no clarification. Later, someone whispered loudly enough for me to hear, "They're basically married already." Claire laughed. She didn't deny it. On the way home, I said nothing. At home, she removed her jacket and said, "You're being distant lately." The irony nearly made me laugh. "I'm giving you space," I replied. She nodded approvingly. "Thank you. That's mature." Mature. As if disappearing gracefully was a virtue. That night, I understood something final. She wasn't confused. She wasn't conflicted. She had already decided who mattered. And she was just waiting for me to stop resisting it. And when someone praises your absence, they're already imagining life without you. The breaking point didn't arrive with shouting. It arrived with certainty. It happened at a formal dinner. One Claire insisted I attend, because it would look better. The table was full of people who mattered to her, people whose approval she chased without shame. I sat beside her, but felt farther away than ever. Someone asked about long hours, about sacrifices, about ambition. Daniel spoke confidently, then smiled and said, "It helps when you have a partner who understands the trade-offs." Claire nodded immediately. "She's lucky," someone said. "Not everyone has that kind of support." Claire laughed softly and replied, "I'm lucky he doesn't expect much." The table laughed. That was it. No hesitation. No apology. I looked at her, waiting for awareness to hit. It didn't. Instead, she added, "He's very adaptable. Not everyone needs to be fulfilled the same way." Adaptable. Like something meant to bend. The laughter felt distant, muted by the realization settling inside me. I wasn't her husband in that moment. I was proof of her tolerance. On the drive home, I didn't speak. Neither did she. At home, she finally said, "You were quiet again. Did I say something wrong?" I looked at her calmly and said, "You humiliated me." She scoffed. "Oh, please. Don't be dramatic." That word again. Dramatic. She turned away and added, "You know I'm just being honest." Honest. As if cruelty becomes acceptable when framed that way. That night, lying beside her, I felt nothing. No anger. No sadness. Just clarity. When someone publicly reduces you and feels no guilt afterward, the relationship is already over, even if the paperwork hasn't caught up yet. After that night, she grew colder. Not angry. Not distant. Just finished. She stopped asking where I was going. Stopped caring when I came home late. Stopped pretending my absence mattered. Our conversations shrank to logistics. Groceries, schedules, reminders. Anything emotional was redirected elsewhere. If I spoke about my day, she nodded politely, eyes already drifting back to her phone. When Daniel's name came up, it wasn't accidental anymore. "He thinks I should move into strategy," she said one evening. "He says I'd thrive." I asked softly, "And what do you think?" She shrugged. "I think he sees me." That sentence hollowed the room. Weeks passed like that. Quiet, functional, empty. She stayed out later, came home energized, and slept facing away from me. Once, I reached for her hand in bed. She gently pulled away and said, "I'm tired." But I wasn't asking for her body. I was asking for reassurance. One night, she said it plainly, without cruelty, without drama. "I don't think we want the same life anymore." No apology. No sadness. Just a statement. I nodded. Because arguing would have required hope. That was when I understood. She wasn't leaving in anger. She was leaving with relief. And when someone feels relieved by the idea of life without you, they already said goodbye, long before they say the words out loud. I didn't announce my withdrawal. I simply stopped trying. I stopped explaining myself. Stopped correcting her assumptions. Stopped reaching for someone who had already let go. Claire noticed the change slowly. Not because she missed me, but because the resistance was gone. When she talked about Daniel, I didn't react. When she came home late, I didn't ask. The silence unsettled her. "You've been quiet," she said one night, studying me like a problem she couldn't solve. "I'm listening," I replied. That answer bothered her more than anger ever had. She started watching me carefully, as if trying to locate the moment she'd lost control. One evening, she asked, "Are you mad at me?" I shook my head. "No." She frowned. "That's worse." She was right. Because anger means attachment, and I wasn't attached anymore. I began sleeping better, thinking clearer, not because things were better, but because they were ending. I noticed how often she mentioned Daniel now, as if testing my reaction. When I gave her none, she grew restless. "You don't fight for us anymore," she said quietly. I looked at her and answered honestly. I didn't realize I was supposed to compete. That landed. She looked away, said nothing. That night, she lay awake beside me, restless, shifting, while I slept peacefully for the first time in months. And that's when it finally reached her. The truth she hadn't considered. I wasn't waiting to be chosen anymore. I had already stepped out of the contest. And once you stop auditioning for someone's love, they're forced to face what they've already lost. Her panic arrived quietly, not as fear, but as confusion. Claire started asking questions she never cared about before. Small ones, unimportant ones, designed to pull me back in emotion. "What time will you be home?" she asked one evening. "Not sure," I replied calmly. She frowned, as if the answer violated an unspoken rule. She tried harder after that, not with affection, but with attention. She asked about my work, my plans, my thoughts. The effort felt rehearsed. Late, one night, she said my name softly, the way she used to. I didn't respond right away. "You're pulling away," she said. I looked at her and answered honestly. "I already left. You just didn't notice." Her face tightened. "That's not fair," she said. Fair. The words sounded hollow now. She mentioned counseling, suggested we talk things through, used words she'd ignored for months. I listened politely, because politeness was all I had left to give. "You don't want to fix this?" she asked finally. I shook my head slowly. "No, I don't want to pretend anymore." Silence filled the room. She looked smaller then, not weaker, just exposed. "I didn't think you'd actually leave," she whispered. That was the truth she couldn't escape. I stood up, not angry, just resolved. "You didn't think I mattered enough to lose?" I said quietly. She didn't argue. There was nothing left to say. That night, as I packed a bag, I felt something unfamiliar. Not grief, not relief. Clarity. When respect dies, love doesn't survive it. And once you finally choose yourself, there's no humiliation powerful enough to pull you back. I didn't disappear from her life overnight. I faded out in a way that made her notice every absence. At first, she enjoyed the freedom. No explanations. No accountability. She went out more, posted more, laughed louder online. People congratulated her bravery, called her strong, praised her glow. I heard about it secondhand, and felt nothing. Then the questions started. She texted once. Casual. Careful. "Did you forget to change the address on the insurance?" I replied politely. Yes. No follow-up. No opening. That silence bothered her more than anger ever could. Weeks passed. Her messages became less practical, more personal. "I found one of your shirts. It still smells like you." I didn't realize how quiet the apartment would feel. I didn't respond. She had spent years teaching me that my presence wasn't necessary. I was simply honoring the lesson. Mutual friends began noticing. They asked why I seemed lighter, calmer. They asked why she seemed restless, defensive. I learned she talked about me often, but never admitted why I left. She framed it as distance, misalignment, growth. Never humiliation. Never comparison. Never disrespect. Because that would require accountability. One night, months later, she called. No warning. No text. I watched the phone ring. Felt the old instinct rise. And let it pass. That was the moment I knew I was free. Because I no longer needed closure from someone who only valued me once I stopped offering myself. The shift became visible to others before she admitted it to herself. Because reputation travels faster than truth. People started asking careful questions. The kind that sound supportive, but aren't. Are you okay? You seem different lately. She laughed them off. Said she was busy. Said life was changing. But change without direction looks like loss. Daniel stopped coming up in conversation. Not because he was gone, but because he wasn't enough. The attention she thought would replace me didn't arrive the way she expected. Invitations slowed. Calls shortened. Responses took longer. People sensed instability. And instability makes others cautious. She started correcting stories about me. Clarifying timelines. Defending herself unprompted. That's how you know guilt has settled in. Someone finally asked directly, "What happened between you two?" She paused too long, then said, "It just stopped working." That answer satisfied no one. Because people remember how she spoke about me. How she laughed. How she compared. They didn't need my version. They had witnessed hers. I ran into someone we both knew, who said quietly, "You handled that with a lot of grace." Grace, a word she never used when I was still there. She heard about that compliment. And it stayed with her. I know because she texted again. Weeks later. "I hope you're doing well. I didn't realize how much you carried." I read it once. Then put the phone down. No reply. Some realizations don't deserve conversation. They deserve silence. That's when it truly settled for her. She hadn't lost a man. She had lost her reflection. And the hardest consequence isn't being left. It's being remembered accurately. My life didn't improve loudly. It improved quietly, the way real things do. I changed routines, not to escape memories, but to stop living inside them. Mornings became calm again. Coffee without tension. Silence without judgment. I focused on work, not to prove anything, but because focus felt natural again. People noticed the change, not because I talked about it, but because I stopped shrinking. Opportunities appeared where insecurity used to sit. I spoke with certainty, without checking for approval. I listened without waiting to be dismissed. That confidence wasn't new. It was restored. Meanwhile, her world kept circling the same conversations, the same explanations, the same unanswered questions. She heard through others that I was doing well, not thriving dramatically, just steady, grounded. That unsettled her. She reached out once more, longer this time, carefully written. "I didn't realize what I had. I thought you'd always be there. I see things differently now." I read it slowly, without emotion. There was a time those words would have undone me. Now they felt late. I didn't reply, not out of spite, not out of cruelty, but because I no longer needed to be understood by someone who understood too late. The rebuilding wasn't about winning. It was about returning to myself. And the moment she finally saw my value was the exact moment it stopped being negotiable. That's the quiet power of leaving with dignity. The truth settled slowly, not as regret, but as acceptance. I wasn't healed by time. I was healed by distance. By no longer standing where I had to explain my worth. I stopped checking if she watched my stories. Stopped wondering who she talked to. Stopped measuring myself against a past that no longer existed. Peace arrived quietly, the kind that doesn't announce itself. I learned that humiliation doesn't begin with betrayal. It begins when someone teaches you that asking for respect is too much. I also learned something else. Something harder. People don't lose you when they cheat. They lose you when they stop valuing you. By the time they realize it, you're already gone. I saw her one last time from a distance. Laughing too loudly. Trying too hard. She looked familiar, but no longer relevant. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel victory. I felt gratitude. Grateful I didn't stay long enough to forget who I was. Grateful I walked away before resentment turned me bitter. Some endings don't need closure conversations. They end the moment you stop begging to be seen. And the most powerful response to humiliation isn't revenge. isn't explanation. It's building a life so calm, so grounded, that your absence becomes the loudest thing they ever hear.